Captain Kieran Vasquez sat in his ship's cockpit, watching the asteroid belt drift by like a river of frozen time. His companion, First Engineer Tommy Corso, was seated at the navigation console, frowning at a data stream on the holoscreen. "Something's not right," Tommy muttered, running a hand through his dark, close-cropped hair. He jabbed a finger at the screen. "Look at that spike. Energy signature's way too high for a natural event." Kieran glanced over, his curiosity piqued. Could be a rogue mining drone, or some ancient debris giving off residual power. "Let's get a closer look." "Sounds good," Tommy said, "but I've got a bad feeling about this one." They'd been on routine survey missions before, combing the asteroid belt for rare minerals and charting safe passages. It was monotonous work, but the kind that could suddenly lurch into danger if they stumbled onto something unexpected. Kieran adjusted the ship's course, steering toward the source of the signal. The glowing halo of a larger asteroid came into view, and nestled against its surface was a small, damaged craft. The alien vessel was sleek, with a silvery, organic design that contrasted sharply with human-made ships. Even from a distance, it was clear the vessel had taken a beating. "Looks like someone's in trouble," Kieran said, leaning forward in his seat. Tommy pulled up a scan of the ship. Hull's intact, but life supports at minimum levels. Whoever's in there must be on their last legs. Kieran brought their ship in closer, carefully matching the alien vessel's rotation. "Tommy, prep the airlock. Let's go see if we can help." Tommy stood, grabbing a utility pack from the wall. "I'm with you, Cap. Let's move." The two men suited up and cycled through the airlock. The alien ship's entry hatch was still functional, if barely. With a few careful adjustments to the controls, the hatch hissed open. A faint mist escaped, and a dim, flickering light illuminated the narrow corridor beyond. Inside, the air was stale and cold. Panels on the walls had been torn open, wires hanging loose. The deck plates underfoot vibrated faintly, a testament to a life support system on its last gasp. "Hello," Kieran called out, his voice echoing down the corridor. "We're here to help. Is anyone alive in there?" A faint noise came from deeper within the ship, something that sounded like a low moan. "Over there," Tommy said, nodding toward a partially closed door. The two men approached cautiously, stepping over broken equipment and debris. Kieran's heart raced as he reached for the manual release lever. When the door slid open, they found her. The alien woman was crumpled on the floor, her long, slender frame covered in bruises and cuts. Her skin was a pale lavender that seemed almost translucent under the flickering lights. She looked up at them with wide, golden eyes, her expression a mix of fear and relief. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kieran knelt beside her, speaking in a calm, steady tone. "I'm Captain Vasquez. This is my engineer, Tommy. We found your ship. Can you move?" She winced as she tried to sit up, clutching her side. "I don't know. My ribs?" Kieran nodded. "We'll get you out of here. Can you tell us your name?" She hesitated as if uncertain whether to trust them. Finally, she said, "Alan." "Okay, Alan. We're going to carry you back to our ship. Tommy, help me lift her." Tommy crouched beside Kieran, and together they gently lifted Alan off the floor. She groaned softly, her head resting against Kieran's shoulder. "Hang on," Tommy said, glancing back toward the airlock. "We'll have you out of here in no time." As they made their way back through the ship, Alan's voice grew a little stronger. You don't have to do this," she said. "I'm just what?" Kieran asked, looking down at her. "Just one," she murmured. "Why would you risk yourselves for me?" Kieran paused, then spoke firmly. "Because you're alive. That's reason enough." They brought her aboard their own vessel, settling her into the medbay. Kieran worked quickly to stabilize her condition while Tommy monitored the ship's systems. Alan's breathing steadied, and she opened her eyes again. "You saved me," she said softly. "You're not safe yet," Kieran replied. "We're taking you to a Concord medical station. They'll be able to treat you properly." She nodded weakly. "Thank you." Tommy leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "She's lucky we found her when we did. Another few hours and she might not have made it." "Luck or fate, we've got her now," Kieran said. "That's all that matters." Over the next several hours, as the ship made its way toward the station, Alan began to recover. She was quiet, her movements slow and careful, but she responded when Kieran spoke to her. "What happened to your ship?" he asked during one of their conversations. Aelin frowned, her golden eyes distant. "Asteroids," she said. "A sudden drift. My vessel wasn't built for such impacts. I lost control." "And you were out here alone?" Kieran pressed. "Yes. I'm a researcher. I was collecting data on this region when the storm hit." "That timing," Tommy said from his console. "Still, you held out long enough for us to find you. That's something." Aelin looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You risked yourselves for me." "Why?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Kieran said. "We couldn't just leave you out there." She tilted her head, considering his words. "The right thing," she repeated softly. As the ship neared the medical station, Kieran felt a strange sense of attachment growing. Aelin had been a stranger, a life form he'd never seen before, but now she was something more. She was a reminder of the fragile connections that existed across the vastness of space. When they arrived, the medics took Aelin into their care. Kieran watched from the observation deck as they worked to stabilize her condition. Tommy stood beside him. His usual smirk softened into something more thoughtful. "You think she'll be okay?" Tommy asked. Kieran nodded. "She's tough. I think she'll pull through." "She's got you to thank for that," Tommy said, clapping a hand on Kieran's shoulder. "No," Kieran replied, his gaze still fixed on Aelin. "She's got all of us to thank. We're in this together." And as he stood there, watching her breathe easier with each passing moment, Kieran felt a quiet sense of determination. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but they'd done something good, something that mattered. They'd saved a life, and in doing so, they'd proven that even in the cold void of space, humanity's capacity for compassion remained strong. Chapter 2: Building Trust. In the days that followed, Kieran and Tommy found themselves more involved in Aelin's recovery than they had initially expected. The medics at the Concord station had stabilized her condition, but Aelin remained withdrawn. She spent her time in the recovery ward's observation deck, staring out at the station's shimmering starfield. It was clear she wasn't just healing physically. There was something deeper weighing her down. Kieran sat beside her on one of their routine visits. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. Aelin glanced at him, her golden eyes distant. "You've already done so much for me. Why are you still here?" "Because you haven't told me to leave," he said with a small smile. "And I get the feeling you could use someone to talk to." She looked back out at the stars. "I've never been good at that. Talking." "Well," Kieran said, leaning back in his chair, "it's never too late to start." Aelin stayed quiet, but she didn't walk away. That was enough for Kieran. He had no plans to push her, just to be there, a steady presence she could rely on. Tommy, however, had a different approach. One evening, he showed up with a deck of cards. "We're playing," he declared, pulling a chair up to their table. Kieran raised an eyebrow. "Playing what, exactly?" "Doesn't matter," Tommy said, shuffling the cards with practiced speed. "Anything to get this place feeling a little less like a medical ward. Besides, I bet our new friend here could use a distraction." Aelin hesitated, watching as Tommy dealt the cards. "I don't know how to play," she said softly. "Doesn't matter," Tommy replied with a grin. "I'll teach you. Pick these up and let's get started." To everyone's surprise, Aelin's most of all, she joined in. The game was simple, a variation of a human card game Kieran and Tommy had played on long voyages. Aelin was a quick learner, and before long, she was beating Tommy handily. All right," Tommy said, throwing his cards down with mock frustration. "You're a shark, I get it. Don't rub it in." Aelin's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. "You're just not very good," she said, her voice tinged with the slightest hint of humor. Kieran laughed, leaning back in his chair. "Looks like you've met your match, Tommy." "Oh, you think so, huh?" Tommy shot back. "Fine, rematch tomorrow. Same time, same place." Aelin nodded, the faint smile lingering on her face. "Tomorrow." As the days passed, Aelin's demeanor continued to shift. She still had moments of silence, but now there were more moments of engagement, asking Kieran about his homeworld, teasing Tommy when he lost yet another round of cards, and even sharing fragments of her own story. One evening, as they sat in the station's recreation area, Aelin leaned forward, her elbows resting on the table. My people don't usually interact with outsiders, she admitted. We keep to ourselves. Focus on our work. And what work is that? Kieran asked. Aelin hesitated, then said energy research. My team was studying ways to harness stellar radiation more efficiently. But the data we needed could only be gathered from this sector. That's why I was out there. Alone. Alone? Tommy asked, frowning. That's a pretty risky move. Aelin's expression darkened. We didn't think it would be. The asteroids weren't supposed to drift into that area. But something changed, maybe a gravitational anomaly, maybe a miscalculation. Either way, I was caught in it. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. Kieran studied her carefully. You mentioned a team. Did they send you out there? She shook her head. It was my choice. I thought if I could gather the data myself, it would save us weeks, maybe months. I didn't think I'd end up like that. Tommy leaned back in his chair, his usual humor gone. Sounds like you got dealt a bad hand. Aelin looked down at her hands as if weighing those words. Yes, she said quietly. I suppose I did. Well, Kieran said, his voice steady, bad hands happen. The question is what you do next. Aelin met his gaze. And what do you think I should do? He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. Stick around. See what's out there. You've got time to figure it out. She didn't respond right away, but Kieran saw a flicker of something in her eyes, curiosity, maybe even a glimmer of determination. It was a start. That night, as Kieran and Tommy walked back to their quarters, Tommy gave Kieran a sideways glance. You think she's gonna be okay? I think she's getting there, Kieran said. It'll take time, but she's stronger than she knows. Tommy snorted. You always did like playing the mentor. Just don't expect me to start calling you Captain Sage. Kieran smirked. How about Captain Genius? Captain Handsome? Not in a million years, Tommy replied, grinning. But seriously, you've got a way of pulling people out of their shells. I think she'll come around. They stopped outside their quarters and Kieran turned to Tommy. You did good back there too, you know. That card game, she needed something to take her mind off everything. Tommy shrugged. Hey, everybody's got their talents. Mine just happens to be losing gracefully. Kieran chuckled and clapped him on the shoulder. We make a good team, you and me. Don't get mushy on me, Cap, Tommy said, rolling his eyes. Let's just see if we can keep her smiling. As they settled into their bunks, Kieran found himself thinking about Aelin's faint smile, the way her voice had softened when she spoke about her past, and the moments when she'd laughed, really laughed, for the first time since they'd met her. It wasn't much, but it was enough. They were making progress. Together. Chapter 3, The Connection. The following week, Kieran found himself growing increasingly comfortable with Aelin's presence aboard the ship. She had begun to show more interest in their daily routines, often standing in the doorway of the bridge, quietly observing as he and Tommy handled navigation or performed maintenance checks. Got any questions? Kieran asked one morning when he noticed her leaning against the wall. Aelin hesitated, her gaze flicking to the controls. I'm just watching. I don't want to interfere. Tommy spun around in his chair, gesturing grandly at the panels. Interfere away, lady. It's not every day we get someone who's genuinely curious about our highly professional. He paused to flick a few switches, button-pressing skills. She actually smiled at that, the corners of her mouth tugging upward. It's more complicated than it looks. Kieran chuckled. That's the truth. Don't let Tommy fool you. He makes it look easy, but it took him years to master the art of pressing the big green button. Years, Tommy said solemnly, nodding. Sweat, tears, a few near misses with the airlock. But now I'm a certified button presser extraordinaire. Aelin tilted her head, her expression caught between amusement and genuine curiosity. Is it really so difficult? Depends, Kieran said, leaning back in his chair. Some systems are straightforward. Others, well, they might as well be written in ancient code. But the trick is learning to trust your instincts. And your crew. Tommy tossed a small tool onto the console. What Cap's saying is, you mess up once, you'll hear about it forever. Ain't that right, Captain? Let's plot a course through a nebula. That was one time, Kieran said, rolling his eyes. And we didn't get lost. No, we didn't, Tommy admitted. But we smelled like ionized gas for a week. Aelin laughed softly, the sound almost startling. It was the first time she had done so in their presence. Nice to know someone appreciates my humor, Tommy said with a grin. Cap here's got no taste. Kieran raised an eyebrow. I have excellent taste. I'm just not easily impressed. Tommy turned to Aelin. See what I'm dealing with? She smiled again, this time a little wider. I think you're both interesting. Interesting, huh? Tommy said, leaning back in his chair. I'll take that as a compliment. Over the next few days, Aelin became more involved. She would join them in the galley for meals, quietly listening to their banter and occasionally chiming in. She even started asking questions about their equipment and routines. Kieran noticed how Tommy seemed to enjoy showing off their ship's quirks, explaining the intricacies of the engines or the scanner arrays with the enthusiasm of a proud tinkerer. One evening, after dinner, Kieran caught her in the cargo hold examining one of their storage containers. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "Didn't mean to sneak up on you," he said. "What's on your mind?" Aelin gestured to the container. "I was wondering how you manage supplies on such long journeys. It's different from how we do it." Kieran nodded, stepping closer. "We've got a system. Tommy keeps track of inventory and we restock whenever we hit a friendly station. It's not perfect, but it works." "Is it difficult?" she asked. "Balancing what you need with what you can carry?" "Sometimes," Kieran admitted, "but it helps that we don't travel alone. Concord stations, friendly outposts, they make all the difference. Even if we're out here for weeks at a time, we know there's always a place to restock." Aelin looked thoughtful. "My people never relied on others that way. We've always been self-sufficient." "There's nothing wrong with that," Kieran said. "But there's also no shame in accepting help when you need it." She didn't respond right away, but when she finally looked at him, her expression was soft. "You believe that, don't you?" "I do," he said simply. After that, Aelin started spending more time with them on the bridge. Kieran showed her how to monitor the ship's systems, and Tommy taught her the basics of navigation. She picked things up quickly, her sharp mind and keen attention to detail making her a natural. Tommy jokingly referred to her as the newest member of the crew, a title she accepted with a quiet smile. "Careful," Kieran said one day as Aelin plotted a course to a nearby system. "You're starting to make us look bad." "That's not my intention," she replied, though there was a playful glint in her golden eyes. "She's lying," Tommy said, leaning over to check her calculations. "She's totally out to replace us." "Aren't you, Aelin?" "Not yet," she said with a hint of amusement, surprising them both. Kieran shook his head. "Tommy, you've created a monster." "Nah," Tommy said, grinning. "She's just finally getting comfortable." "About time, if you ask me." Kieran agreed. Aelin's transformation over the past weeks was remarkable. She was more at ease, more willing to engage. And, though she still had her moments of introspection, she no longer seemed weighed down by the memories of her ordeal. One quiet evening, Kieran and Tommy were running a diagnostic on the main power grid when Aelin appeared in the doorway. "Do you need help?" she asked. Tommy glanced at Kieran, then back at Aelin. "Sure. Grab that scanner and tell me what readings you get from the second relay." Aelin picked up the scanner and crouched down beside the console. She watched the display intently, then relayed the numbers to Tommy. "Not bad," Tommy said. "Looks like you've got a knack for this." She glanced at Kieran. "What about you? How did you learn to do all this?" "Trial and error," Kieran said with a shrug. "A lot of long nights, a lot of mistakes. But I had good people around me, just like Tommy does now." Tommy smirked. "Don't get all sentimental on me, Cap. We've got work to do." "Sentimental?" Kieran said, grinning. "I'm just telling it like it is." Aelin's soft laugh echoed in the room. It was a sound Kieran hadn't heard enough of, and he found himself wanting to hear it more. They finished the diagnostic and leaned back, satisfied with their work. Aelin sat with them, and for a moment they just enjoyed the quiet hum of the ship's systems. "I think I understand now," Aelin said softly, almost to herself. "Understand what?" Kieran asked. She looked at him, her expression open and earnest. "Why you do this? Why you stay out here, so far from home?" "It's not just about the work," Kieran said. "It's about the people you meet, the connections you make. That's what makes it worthwhile." Tommy gave him a sly look. "Look at you, Captain Philosophy." Kieran rolled his eyes. "Whatever you say, Tommy." Aelin smiled at their exchange, and for the first time, Kieran felt like she was truly a part of their little crew. Chapter 4, Uncharted Waters. Several weeks had passed since Aelin first joined their crew. The ship had settled into a steady rhythm. Kieran, Tommy, and Aelin spent their days navigating through uncharted star clusters, cataloging asteroids rich in minerals, and occasionally exchanging a few stories over dinner. For the first time in a long while, it fell. "D the signal. What do you think?" Tommy asked, leaning over his shoulder. "Could be a trap." Kieran shook his head. "The Concorde rarely patrols this region. If it's a trap, it's not for us. But it could be someone in serious trouble." Aelin stood just behind them, arms crossed, her expression pensive. "What kind of vessel sends a signal like that?" "I'm not sure," Kieran said, adjusting the display. "It's old tech, though. Older than Concorde standard by at least a century." "So, we go in?" Tommy asked, his tone cautious. Kieran glanced at Aelin. "What do you think?" Aelin hesitated, then said, "If someone's out there and they need help, we should respond." Tommy snorted. "Well, I guess that settles it. Cap, plot the course." Kieran smiled faintly and began the calculations. The nebula was a maze of charged particles, intense radiation, and shifting gravimetric fields. It would be a challenge even for their well-equipped ship, but Kieran had no doubt they could handle it. As they approached the nebula, the faint distress signal grew marginally stronger. Aelin stayed close to the bridge's main console, monitoring the signal with a practiced eye. "It's definitely a repeating pattern," she said. "But the intervals aren't consistent. Something's disrupting it. Could be the nebula's interference," Tommy suggested. "Or the ship's power source is failing. Either way, we'll know soon enough," Kieran said. When they finally breached the outer edges of the nebula, the ship was bathed in a swirling sea of light and color. Charged particles crackled against the hull, and the ship's shields hummed under the strain. Kieran kept his hands steady on the controls, adjusting their course with precision. Tommy kept an eye on the engineering readouts. "Shields are holding, but I don't want to stay in here too long. This soup will fry our sensors if we linger." "I'll keep us moving," Kieran said, his eyes locked on the displays. "Aelin, keep monitoring that signal. If you notice any pattern changes, let me know." She nodded, her fingers dancing over the console. "Understood." The closer they got to the source of the signal, the more unstable the environment became. Radiation spikes forced them to adjust course multiple times, and the ship's internal temperature began to rise. Sweat beaded on Kieran's forehead, but he ignored it, focusing instead on the rapidly approaching signal source. "It's just ahead," Aelin said. "Bearing 027. "I see it," Kieran replied. "Tommy, be ready to stabilize the ship if we hit any turbulence." "You got it, Cap," Tommy said, his voice steady despite the strain showing on his face. A small, ancient vessel appeared on their forward display. Its hull was scorched and pitted, and a section of it had caved in entirely. The distress signal emanated from a barely functional transmitter mounted on what was left of the bridge. The ship looked as if it had been drifting here for decades, if not longer. "Doesn't look like anyone's home," Tommy said. "Think there's still a crew inside?" "Let's find out," Kieran said. "Aelin, see if you can open a comm link." She worked quickly, adjusting frequencies and filters to cut through the interference. "This is the Concord vessel Tempest. We received your distress signal. Can you respond?" For a long moment there was only static. Then, a faint voice broke through, crackling and distorted. "Barely alive, help." Kieran leaned forward. "We hear you. Stay calm. We're coming aboard." Tommy shot him a concerned look. "Cap, this ship's a death trap. Are you sure about this?" "We didn't come all this way to leave them behind," Kieran said firmly. "Tommy, you're with me. Aelin, stay here and monitor our progress. If anything goes wrong, be ready to pull us out." Aelin nodded, her expression serious. "Understood. Be careful." Kieran and Tommy suited up and docked with the ancient vessel. The airlock creaked as it sealed, and the two men stepped into the dimly lit interior. The corridors were cramped and filled with debris, the walls scorched by long-extinguished fires. Emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the bulkheads. "Hello," Kieran called out. "We're here to help. Where are you?" A faint groan came from deeper within the ship. Kieran and Tommy exchanged glances before moving cautiously toward the sound. They found a man slumped against the wall in a small, cluttered room. He was gaunt, his face pale and his breathing shallow. "Easy there," Kieran said, kneeling beside him. "You're going to be okay. Can you tell us your name?" The man opened his eyes and rasped, "Garrick." "All right, Garrick," Tommy said. "We're going to get you out of here. Think you can stand?" Garrick tried, but his legs gave out almost immediately. Kieran caught him before he hit the floor. "Don't push yourself. We'll carry you." The journey back to their ship was slow and tense. The damaged vessel groaned around them, each creak and shudder a reminder that it might not hold together much longer. When they finally reached the airlock, Kieran let out a quiet breath of relief. Aelin was waiting on the other side, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Get him to the med bay," she said, moving aside so they could pass. "I'll run a diagnostic on the ship's systems. If there's anything else we can salvage, I'll let you know." Tommy gave her a nod. "Good plan. Let's get this guy stable first." Back in the medbay, Kieran and Tommy worked together to stabilize Garrick's condition. It was touch and go for a while, but eventually his breathing steadied, and he fell into a restless sleep. Aelin entered quietly, handing Kieran a report on their ship's power levels. "He's going to make it," Kieran said, glancing at the report before setting it aside. "We'll need to decontaminate before we head back out, but at least he's alive." Tommy leaned against the wall, exhaustion evident on his face. "Yeah, but what was he doing out there in the first place? That ship looked older than any Concorde vessel I've seen." "We'll ask him when he's ready," Kieran said. "Right now, let's just make sure he's comfortable." As they settled back into the ship's routine, Kieran couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since they first found Aelin. Together, they were becoming more than just a crew. They were a team, bound by trust and the shared goal of helping those in need. The galaxy was still vast and full of challenges, but for now, they knew they could face it together. Chapter 5, The Choice. Kieran sat in his captain's chair, running a hand through his hair as he stared at the navigation console. The past few days had been intense, rescuing Garrick, stabilizing the ancient vessel's systems, and navigating their way out of the nebula without losing the ship to radiation or gravimetric anomalies. Tommy and Aelin were just as drained, but they hadn't lost their focus. If anything, the challenges they'd faced had brought the three of them closer together. "Garrick's doing better," Aelin reported, stepping onto the bridge. She carried a small datapad, her expression calm but thoughtful. "His vitals are stabilizing, and he's started to eat." "Good to hear," Kieran replied. "Did he say anything more about where he came from?" Aelin shook her head. "Not yet. He's still recovering, but I think he's warming up to us. It might just take some time." Tommy swiveled around in his seat, looking between the two of them. "You mean he's still playing the mysterious stranger card? Come on, he's got to have something to say after everything we've been through." "He's cautious," Aelin said, her tone measured. "From what he's hinted at, his ship's mission wasn't exactly standard. I think he's trying to figure out if he can trust us." Kieran leaned back in his chair, considering. "Then we keep giving him reasons to trust us. A little patience goes a long way." Tommy crossed his arms. "Patience is one thing, but I'm getting tired of playing guessing games. If he knows something that could help us avoid another situation like this, we need to know sooner rather than later." "Give it a day or two," Kieran said. "I'll talk to him again once he's stronger. For now, let's focus on getting back on course. We've already burned too much fuel in this nebula." As Tommy turned back to the console, Aelin lingered by the doorway. "Kieran, there's something else," she said quietly. He looked up, seeing a flicker of unease in her expression. "What is it?" "I reviewed the data we pulled from Garrick's ship," she said. "It's not just old. It's ancient. Centuries older than anything on Concorde record. The tech on board is primitive by our standards, but it also has modifications I don't recognize. It's like it was retrofitted with components that don't match its original design." Kieran frowned. "You think it's from before the Concorde?" "It's possible," Aelin said. "But there's more. I found traces of an energy signature we haven't seen before. It's faint, but it doesn't match anything in the database. It's almost as if his ship passed through an area of space that hasn't been charted, maybe even an entirely different region of the galaxy." Tommy turned back around, his curiosity piqued. "Hold on. You're saying he came from outside Concorde territory?" "Possibly," Aelin said. "If that's true, he might have knowledge of systems we've never encountered. New resources, new routes, maybe even new allies. Or new problems," Kieran said, his voice serious. "If his ship was damaged out there, it could mean whatever's in that uncharted space is dangerous. If we go poking around without knowing what we're dealing with." "Not saying we jump in blind," Tommy interjected. "But if he knows something valuable, we should find out. I mean, we're explorers, right? Isn't that the whole point?" Kieran studied Aelin, her thoughtful expression mirroring his own unease. "You're not wrong, Tommy. But if Garrick's ship is that old and he's from that far out, we're going to have to tread carefully. I'll talk to him. Let's see what he's willing to share." Later that evening, Kieran entered the medbay. Garrick was sitting up in bed, a pale glow from the overhead lights casting faint shadows on his face. He looked up as Kieran approached, his expression cautious but no longer hostile. "You're feeling better," Kieran said, pulling up a chair. "That's good. Thanks to you and your crew," Garrick replied. His voice was still weak, but it carried a note of sincerity. Kieran leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "We're glad we could help. But I have to ask, where did you come from? Your ship, there's something different about it." "Something old?" Garrick hesitated, then said, "I can't tell you everything. Not yet. But you're right. My ship isn't from Concorde territory. It's from beyond the outer reach." Kieran raised an eyebrow. "The outer reach? No one goes out that far." "Not anymore," Garrick said. "But we used to. My people were explorers long before the Concorde was established. We traveled farther than most would dare, mapping regions of space that even now remain uncharted. That's why my ship looks ancient, it is. It's a relic refitted to keep it functional. But it's also a record of places you've never seen, stars you've never named. Kieran nodded slowly. So what happened? Why were you out there alone? Garek's expression darkened. I was following a trail. Something unexpected. We detected an anomaly, an energy source unlike anything we'd ever encountered. I was sent to investigate, but I was unprepared for what I found. The environment was hostile. My ship took damage I couldn't repair. I had no choice but to send out that distress signal. What kind of anomaly? Kieran pressed. Garek hesitated again. I can't explain it fully. It was unstable, but the power it emitted, it could change everything. If someone could harness it, it might provide energy far beyond anything the Concorde has. Or it could destroy anyone who tries. Kieran glanced at the data pad in his hand where Aylin's report still glowed faintly. If this energy is that powerful, why didn't your people send more ships? Why send you alone? Garek's eyes hardened. Because we didn't know what we were dealing with. I was a scout sent to test the waters. They weren't going to risk more lives until they knew it was safe. And now? Kieran asked. What happens now that you're here with us? Garek met his gaze. That depends on you. I owe you my life, Captain. But if we're going to act on this information, you need to be prepared. The Concorde isn't ready for what's out there. If you go searching for this energy source, you'll be entering uncharted territory, literally and figuratively. Kieran sat back, considering Garek's words. The allure of discovering something new, something that could redefine their understanding of the galaxy, was hard to ignore. But the risks were equally daunting. You're asking us to make a choice, Kieran said quietly. To follow a lead that might be the biggest discovery of our time, or to let it go and stay safe. Garek nodded. The choice is yours. But know this, if you do nothing, someone else will find it eventually. And they might not have your caution. Kieran rose to his feet. I'll think about it. Get some rest, Garek. We'll talk again soon. As he left the medbay, Kieran's mind raced with possibilities. He would need to discuss this with Tommy and Aylin, weigh their options carefully. The ship's next course wasn't just about exploring new space, it was about deciding who they wanted to be and what risks they were willing to take.